Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for coming into the conference and staying for the last one and not hopping off to the airport for the last plane. Okay, and I'd also like to thank TestCon for an absolutely fantastic conference. I've enjoyed myself, and also I've learned lots of things. I've had some a good few inspirational points there. So thank you very much. Now, I'm going to be talking about reasoning skills and reasoning skills in there and as applying them to testing there. So if we look at that, so first perhaps we'll ask why reasoning skills are important in testing. And actually it turns out that they're very important. So firstly, we use our reasoning skills to work out what's going to be the expected behavior of whatever it is that we're testing. We're also going to use it to design our tests, okay, to interpret the outcomes of those tests, and also we're going to use it for fault finding. So it's pretty important, really. Now, the other thing as well is now, if we now move on to, we'll look at using our reasoning skills on a problem. So you'll have to wake up a little bit now and go with this. So imagine the following. Now, there are 4 cards, A, B, and 4, 7. Now, the cards are such that there is a letter on one side and there's a number on the other side. Now, you don't need to test that. Just take that as a given. Okay, I know as testers we like to test everything, but let's take that as a given. However, there is a rule associated with these cards. The rule is as follows. If the card has a vowel on one side, then it always has an even number on the other side. Now, what I'd like you to think about is, as testers there, what card or cards would you want to turn over in order to determine the truth or falsity of that rule? Okay. Now, you turn over as many cards as you like, but you'd only turn over cards that you need to. So I'll let you think about that for just a few seconds. Okay, so let's move on from here. So let's have a quick show of hands. Who would turn over card A? Okay, yep, there's quite a few there. Who would turn over card B? Okay, so a few there as well. Who would turn over card 4? Okay, yep, so quite a few there as well. Who would turn over card 7? Okay, so not so many cards there. Not so many people there. Okay, so let's move on from here. Right, so here's that rule there. Now, when this is done under laboratory conditions, around about 46% of people will select card A and card A only. Now, if you're going to select just one card, this isn't a bad card to select, okay? But you can select more than that if you want. Now, of those that select more than one card, of those that respond there, 32% select A and 4. But actually 4, as we'll see, is not a particularly good card to select. Now, the best combination to select is 4 and 7. But only about 4% of us select 4 and 7. Okay? And we'll look at why it is that 4 and 7 is a good card, good combination there. And also we'll look at why it is that we don't select, or not many of us select them. So if we think now, first of all, the rule is from, if the card has a vowel, it has an even number. So it's going from vowel to number, this rule. It's not going from number to vowel. So for each of the cards here, if we turn it over, each one of them's got one of 2 possibilities. So if we turn over that first card A, it could be an odd or an even number. If it's an odd number, well, we've disproved the rule, which is what we're trying to do. So this is a good card to turn over, which is why a lot of people choose that card. If it is an even number there, it's just consistent with the rule. We haven't proved the rule, okay? It's just consistent with it. Now, for card B here, the rule isn't about consonants here. So actually, if we turn this card over, and not many people choose to under lab conditions, it doesn't give us any information. Okay. Now, quite a few people want to select card 4, so 32% 4 and 7 there. Okay. Now, the belief is that if they turn over that there, well, first they may be believing that actually we're proving the rule there. Okay. But all we're doing there is if we turn it over and there's an A there, or a vowel, it's simply consistent with the rule. It hasn't proved it. And if we remember with this, the rule is from vowel to number. It's not from number to vowel. So actually, if we find that there is a consonant there, we haven't disproved the rule. So why is 7 a good card to turn over? Now there's two possibilities. It's a vowel or a consonant. Yep. Now, of course, if there's a vowel there, we've now got a card which has got a vowel on one side and an odd number on the other. So we've disproved the rule. So it's a good card to turn over, but not many of us work it out. Okay. Now, question to you is, was that difficult? Okay. And most of us probably find that quite difficult to do, and most of us don't get it right in the sense that we don't turn over the optimum cards there. So let's move on from that. Now, we'll look at another problem here, okay? But it's from a social point of view. Now, here it is. So basically, you are the owner of a bar, or you manage a bar. And there's 4 people drinking in your bar. One's drinking beer, one's drinking Coke, one is 25 years old, and one is 17 years old. Now, the law in your country is you're not allowed to drink alcohol until you're 18 years old. Okay? Now, if you are caught serving people alcohol in your bar and they're under 18, you're in a lot of trouble. You could get fined, you could lose your license to sell beer. Okay? So it's important that you are able to check that no one here is cheating. So, under these circumstances, which people do you want to check to make sure that this rule is not being violated? What do you think about that? Now, this is really much, much easier. I don't even need to ask you the questions here. Straight away, not only do you know who you want to ask a question to, you even know the questions. Yeah? So, this person drinking beer, how old are they? Because if they're under 18, you're in trouble. This person who's 17 years old, what are they drinking? Because if they're drinking alcohol, again, you're in trouble. Yep. And we also know that actually from here, we know the questions that we don't want to ask or don't need to ask. We don't care how old the Coke drinker is. The rule isn't about that. And we don't care what the 25-year-old is drinking because the rule is not about if you're over 18, you must drink alcohol. That's not the rule. Okay. So, under these circumstances here, the question that I've got to you is, why was the second problem so easy and the first problem was so hard? Okay, and in the first problem there we made lots of mistakes. The second problem we didn't. Now, the one answer that might come back is that actually the second problem is a more concrete example. And then the BDD, or the specification by example people, they all sort of start jumping up and down and getting excited and saying, yes, we were right, we were right. And even if that's true, there's actually a far more important difference between those two sets of tests there, or two cases there. And the difference that's more important is, in the second case there, what we're looking at there is basically a social contract. And we're testing a social contract. And as humans, as people here, we are very skilled we're predisposed to search for and check on cheating on social contracts, and we're highly skilled at it. That thing in the bar there, we all played that as teenagers. Can I get away with going into the bar? Yep. Well, I played it anyway. I don't know about anybody else there. Okay, so we're very skilled at spotting social cheating. We know when people are cheating, yeah? And also we can identify those conditions that are unimportant. So in this AB47 problem there, although we knew that the rule was about vowel to number, not number to vowel, although we knew that, we still found difficulty in avoiding turning over card number 4, which was valueless for information. In this problem, we had the same issue. Okay, we knew it was from alcohol to 18, not 18 to alcohol, but we knew straight away there was no desire by us to ask the 25-year-old what they're drinking, or ask the Coke drinker how old they are. Okay, so one of the benefits of translating something into a social context is that it makes this reasoning much easier. But there's a second thing as well, and that is that when things are in a social context, by reframing the problem so you can see it from a different point of view there, from a different actor's point of view, it will prompt you and stimulate you and primary you to ask different sorts of questions and think of different sorts of tests. So, for example, we now moved on from that job in the bar. We lost the job in the bar because we ended up serving alcohol to teenagers and we got caught and we've lost that job. So now we've got a different job. We are a pension trustee. Okay, and in this pension there for this company, there's only one rule, and the rule is that after somebody's been there for 6 years, they're entitled to a pension. Now, as the pension trustee, you are in task. It's your job to safeguard the money, the fund that's present there. Okay, so if you're paying out money that you shouldn't be paying out, you will be you'll be in trouble. Okay, so there's only four people in this pension fund. This might start to look a little familiar to you now. One's getting a pension, one is not getting a pension, one has been there 12 years, one has been there 5 years. As the pension trustee, who you must avoid losing money out of the fund there, who do you want to check? And again, this is very simple for us, because if we're entrusted with that money, we want to check where the money's going out. So, that person is getting a pension. How long have you worked here? Because if you've worked here less than 6 years, you are not entitled to getting money. Simple, yeah? And that person who's been here 5 years, are you getting a pension? Because you're not entitled to that if you are getting it. Okay, so that's one context. Now if we switch it round, so now you're no longer the pension advisor, but instead you're at the same company, it's the same pension, but now you're the union representative. You have a different job now. Your job is no longer to safeguard that fund. You don't care about that. Your job is to safeguard your members and make sure that your members get the rights and entitlements that they're entitled to. Yep. So, 4 people there, one getting a pension, one not getting a pension, one being there 12 years, one being there 5 years. Who do you want to check to make sure that they are getting their entitlement? Now, straight away now, you want to ask a different set of questions, and they're very easy to you. Okay? You don't care about the person who's getting a pension. That's not your problem. If they're getting one they're not entitled to. But the person who's not getting a pension, you want to ask, how long have you been here? Because if you've been here 6 years or more, you're entitled to a pension. And similarly here, okay? For the person who's been here 12 years, you're entitled to a pension. Are you getting one? So you can see that in a social context there, depending on whether you frame things such as you are the custodian of a resource or you believe that you have rights to access to that resource, that will prompt you to think in very different ways and to ask very different set of questions. Yep. So now I want to talk a little bit about reasoning, because what we can see here is our reasoning in those different problems there has been very different. Even though if you looked at the AB47 and the bar room and the pension fund, the logic there between all of those problems is identical. Okay? But although it's identical, some were very easy to solve and some were difficult. So let's look at reasoning now. So when we talk about reasoning, we don't normally think of different types of reasoning, but there is. And there's one type of reasoning which is called indicative reasoning, or you might know it as logical reasoning. And this is where you're reasoning about the truth and falsity of something. Is it true? Is it false? Is it not true? Is that rule true or not? So when I gave you the AB47 problem, you were reasoning using indicative reasoning. So you were thinking, is that rule true or is it false? And so you're thinking of how you can prove or falsify that rule. Yep. That's indicative reasoning. But there's other types of reasoning, including one, and it's called deontic reasoning. Here, you're not thinking about truth and false. You're thinking about permissions, obligations, and prohibitions. What are you allowed to do? What must you do? What are you forbidden from doing? This is deontic reasoning. And you can see that when I gave you this problem of the bar room there, you were using deontic reasoning. Okay? And actually, all of us have played that as teenagers, certainly in our country there, of trying to get into a pub and get some alcohol when we're younger than 18. Yep. So, and we can see that we're very skilled at deontic reasoning, but we're nowhere near as skilled at indicative reasoning. And we will look at why that is. And it comes from our evolutionary past. Now, there's 3 theories that I'd like you to know about, or that are important for reasoning. And in particular, this non-logical reasoning here. Okay? The first is called dominance theory. The next is called theory of mind. And the third one is called error management theory. Now, we'll look at dominance theory to start with. Now, question is, why do we reason? Why do we reason at all? Or perhaps more to the point, why did the capacity for reasoning evolve? In the same way that our capacity for vision, for hearing, for all of these things evolved through natural selection and evolutionary pressures, our capacity for reasoning has evolved in that same way. So why have we evolved reasoning? Well, the short answer is that intelligent organisms have an advantage over stupid organisms when it comes to survival and reproduction. But that is a bit of a trivial answer, or a trite answer there. However, hidden within that trite answer is a profound insight, and it's where your reasoning comes from. And it is the pressure to compete and to cooperate in a dominance or a social hierarchy has been a major driver driving the intelligence building of our species. So, dominance hierarchy, dominance theory. So, basically, we live in a group. Yeah. Lots of other species live in groups as well. Okay. So antelope, wildebeest, they live in groups of hundreds or thousands. Incidentally, we only live in much smaller groups, primates, up to a maximum of 150 for humans. Okay, and that's the natural size of a group. But there's a difference between their groups and ours. Their groups there, they've got a hierarchy, this dominance, but it's a physical dominance. The dominant in a group of antelope or wildebeest is the strongest one, or the biggest one, or the one that's best at fighting. Whereas with us, it's not like that. We live in a social group, but more so, we live in a social hierarchy. And if you think about, if you lived in a social hierarchy in our ancestral past, think about every time that you encountered someone from your group, what you have to be doing now. You're going to have to work out, well, where do they sit in the group relative to me? Are they up there? Are they above me, or am I above them? Who are they friends with? Who are they allied with? Okay, alliances. Who do they not like? Who owes who what? Okay, who's friends with who? Who's cheating on who? So, and if you think that you have to keep a running count, a tab of all of those things in your mind, and as a group gets bigger, you've got more and more complexity. And actually, it's this complexity now that's limiting the size of the group. Okay, because when it gets too big, that too many people in the group, you can't really cope there. And actually, what you see there is that actually the size of our groups is limited by the size of our brains. So this is some work here, and what you'll see on the horizontal there is the size of our brains, or more specifically, is the ratio of the neocortex there, which is the new part of our brain, relative to the rest of the brain. On the vertical axis, what you see there is the group size that you will see for different species. So if you look there at the black dots, that's different species of monkey. Okay, and you can see there, as the brains of those different species of monkeys get larger, they form larger groups. Similarly for the open circles there, the apes, the larger the ape's brain, the larger the social groups that they form. And there for humans at the top there with the largest brains, we form the largest social groups, which is about 150. Okay? So, we live in this social hierarchy. Now the question is, how do you survive and prosper in a social hierarchy? Okay. Now, how you survive and prosper is going to very much depend on your position in that social hierarchy. If you're in that dominant position, and we'd all like to be in that dominant position, life's pretty good for you. You're going to get basically the best food, the most nutritious food. You're going to be exposed to the less risks, and you're going to get the most number of mating opportunities. So you're going to get so basically good food and lots of sex. So it's a bit like being back at university, but without the studies and the lectures. Okay, now the thing is, how do you maintain this? Because actually, probably everybody else that's in that group is not so happy about this state of affairs. So you're going to need to maintain it, otherwise you're going to go down the group. So there's going to be a series of rules there, and you're going to have to enforce those rules with some form of punishment reward. And you're going to have vigilance. You're going to have to be watching all the other people in the group there, looking at what they're up to, and making sure that they are not cheating on these rules. So now you're going to become very skilled at rules there. Now, the question is, of course, if you're not in that dominant position, and most of us are not going to be, how do you maximize your chances of survival and reproduction? So in the non-dominant position now, life is not so good for you, I'm afraid. Okay, you are going to get the less nutritious, the crummy food, less food there. You're going to be exposed to more risks. So if you are hunters, you're probably going to have a more risky role in the hunt. Perhaps you have to go in for the kill there. Or perhaps if you are foragers, perhaps you are foraging on the edge of the group there, so you're more exposed to predator risks and things like that. And as for mating opportunities, well, if Mr. Big, and it's almost always it's the male that's the dominant there, if Mr. Big has his way, you're having absolutely no mating opportunities. He's saving all that for himself. Okay? So, under these circumstances, what are you going to do? Are you going to just, or what is your ancestor going to have done? Are they just going to have accepted their lot in life? Well, if they had, you wouldn't exist here. Okay? So somehow, despite being in a non-dominant position, they must somehow get to achieve their aims there, which is survival and reproduction. So how do they do that? Well, if there's a load of rules, they're going to be using things like guile and deception, being a bit sneaky, maybe skiving. So if there is something that you must do, doing as little of it as possible. Alliance building, okay? Appeasement, bartering, kinship, friendship. Now, all of these things here. Now, incidentally, if you wanted to look, if there's anyone here who's familiar with management theory, theory X, theory Y, the left-hand side here looks a bit like theory X. Anyone agree? If it does to you, then actually the right-hand side explains why companies that run their companies according to theory X management never terribly successful, because the dominants impose a whole series of rules, and then those that are not dominant spend their entire time trying to circumvent those rules. Okay, so now we can see the importance of dominance theory. We've always lived in social groups, our species, and so for the entire existence of our species, this has been the most important game in town. Succeed at this game, and your future, or your descendants' future, is assured. Okay, so you can see now actually why we are so good at this deontic reasoning, because we, as a species, having spent our entire time reasoning, not indicative reasoning about the truth and falsity of things, but we've been spending our entire time reasoning about permissions and obligations. Okay, about what have we got to do, and who owes us what, and who is cheating on us, and what we can get away with, circumventing those rules there. So this was dominance theory there, and it's a big driver for this deontic reasoning, which is the main reasoning that we're using there. Now I want to introduce another theory here called theory of mind. Okay, now I'll also introduce a couple of characters here, and they're called Bell and Rock. Now, it probably sounds a little bit like maybe a couple of New Age Californian sort of hippies or so, but they're not actually. Okay, what they are is a couple of primates, a couple of chimpanzees. Now, Rock is dominant to Bell, but the experiment is set up so that Bell knows the hidden location of some food. Now, obviously, Bell would like to eat the food, and Rock, if he becomes aware of the food, he will want to use his dominant position to basically steal the food off Bell. So what happens? Well, initially, Bell she tries to avoid or hide this knowledge of the food there. So she stops uncovering the food when Rock is close. But Rock starts to work out that Bell knows the location of some food. So basically what he does is he simply comes along, he shoves her to one side using his physical dominance there, and basically he searches where she's been sitting, because her hiding strategy is no more sophisticated than sitting on the food. He quickly finds it and consumes it. So the question now is, what does Bell do now? So Bell, actually, she doesn't go all the way to the food. She doesn't sit where the food is. Okay. And then the question now is, well, what does Rock do? Well, Rock then, he comes along, he shoves her to one side, and when he can't find the food, he then gradually expands his search area until he finds the food. So how does Bell react to this? Well, Bell, then she gradually sits further and further away, okay? And Rock reacts to that by expanding his search area. Now, eventually, it gets to a situation where Belle is sitting quite a long way away. And now what she does is quite interesting. She waits until Rock is either lost interest, or he looks away, or he wanders away. And when he's done that, she then rapidly goes to the food and consumes it. So how does Rock react to that then? Well, what Rock does is he does the same as before. So he'll search around a bit, and then he will gradually wander away somewhere. And then he will wait until he thinks that Belle is going towards the food. And then what he will do is he will then suddenly wheel around and he will look at where Belle is, trying to catch her out and trying to find the location of this food. And this is extremely unusual behavior for chimpanzees. They don't do this. It's suddenly wheeling around, trying to catch another one out. Okay. Now, eventually, what Belle does is she then develops a strategy if she will lead Rock away from where the food is. And she will sit there and wait until Rock is convinced in his mind, and all of this is in your mind here. Rock is now convinced in his mind that the food is around here, and he initiates a search pattern. And once he's distracted in that search, she then rapidly goes back to where the food is and she consumes it. So, if you think about what's happening in Belle's mind and what's happening in Rock's mind at this stage, and basically what they're doing is both of them are building up a mental representation of what is happening in the other person's or the other chimpanzee's mind. And that mental representation is becoming increasingly sophisticated. Now, so this is evolution of mind, which effectively it's an arms race. So it's a struggle between dominance and outwitting dominance. But the weapons are not physical weapons. The weapons are basically, it's a mental capacity, ever increasing mental capacity to represent and to manipulate the internal representations in the mind of others. Now, you can think and you can reason about test cases, and you're probably very proud of it. Your ability to reason, according to the theory of mind people there, is largely a byproduct of this. So you can reason about test cases because one of your ancestors wanted to hide the bananas from another one. Okay. Now, the final one, the last thing I want to talk about there is something called error management theory. So what is error management theory? It's a theory, and it's quite a simple theory. It says that when we make mistakes or we make decisions, we look not to minimize the errors that we make, the number of errors. Instead, we look to minimize the losses of those errors. And although they sound similar, they can be very different. Yeah. So, if we think there are two types of errors we could be making. So the first type is a false positive. It's where we react to something when there was no threat or opportunity present. And so here you can imagine that you heard a rustle in the bushes, you thought maybe it was a predator, you ran away, but it was just a breeze. Yeah. Type 1 error. Type 2 error is a false negative. It's where we fail to react when a threat or an opportunity is indeed present. So here, the bushes are rustling, you ignore it, you think it's just the wind, and a predator jumps out. That's type 2 errors. Now, when does it pay us to make these mistakes? And the answer is there needs to be two things present. There needs to be two conditions present. The present there is firstly uncertainty, which means that not only is the outcome not known, but the probabilities of the different outcomes are not known or not well understood. And the second is that the cost of making the mistakes there, the different types of mistake, type 1, type 2, are asymmetric. So what do we mean by asymmetric costs? So, imagine the following, and this may well have happened to you yourselves at some stage. Imagine going into a restaurant, you order a plate of shellfish, you consume the shellfish, it's very delicious, but then shortly after that you're feeling a bit ill, and you suddenly realise, well, actually the shellfish was off, so it had gone off, yeah? What's likely to happen to you now? Right, so basically what's likely to happen to you now is that you're going to be sick, yeah? We know that. So this is a defence mechanism. So vomiting is a defence mechanism which is to expel toxins from your stomach there. Yep, so you're sick. Now, if you're unlucky, the toxins have got beyond your stomach, they've got into your lower gut, at which point a second defense mechanism for expelling toxins comes into play, and you get a severe case of diarrhea. Okay? And this can last anything from a couple of hours to a couple of days, yeah? Now, after you've recovered, presuming that you do recover, okay, and you feel well enough to go out and have some food at a restaurant, are you going to go to the same restaurant? Probably not. Yep. You go to a restaurant. Are you going to eat shellfish? Almost certainly not. Yep. You don't eat shellfish, but you sit down to eat, and the person at the next table orders shellfish. Okay, you're not eating it, but the smell wafts over, and you can't help but smell this shellfish. Yeah, and even though you don't want to, think about what your body is likely to do at that moment. Okay? You just recovered from this food poisoning. It's likely that you're going to feel nauseous. Yep. You're going to feel like being sick. You're certainly not going to feel like eating shellfish. Yep. So this is a defense mechanism that your body is set up. Okay? And you can look at the errors here, okay, and understand the error management theory working. What's the cost of eating a plate of food that's full of toxins? You could die. So it's very high. What's the cost of failing to eat a perfectly good plate of food? It's a missed meal. So the cost is much, much lower. So you can understand your body through error management setting up a defense mechanism that is going to cause you to make lots of low-cost errors, avoiding perfectly good meals, in order to make sure that you avoid one very high-cost error, ingesting toxins in a meal that's off. And so the trigger there is that the association between the smell of that food and you were sick shortly afterwards. Okay, you are unwell, and then your body will make that association. So this is error management theory, and what error management theory says is that, of course, you've got to somehow manage those to make those errors, the low-cost errors. So how do we make lots of low-cost errors to avoid the high-cost error? And the error management theorists will say we use something called cognitive biases there. So what we will do is we will systematically distort our decision-making mechanism by systematically distorting our vision, our version of reality, okay, so that we make lots of low-cost errors, or at least low-cost errors in our ancestral past. Okay, there may not be low-cost errors anymore. So all of these cognitive biases you see here, confirmation bias, congruous bias, all of these things you can explain through error management theory. Okay, so you can have a bias that is economically irrational, but at the same time, it may be, if we're maximizing our survival chances, it may well be adaptively rational, because our reasoning processes and our decision-making processes are set up not to maximize economic payoffs, but to maximize our expected evolutionary fitness. Okay, so our reasoning is flawed, and it's flawed because error management uses biases. So this is another problem that we have to deal with there. And it uses biases to bias us towards systematically making what were in our evolutionary past low-cost errors. And the nature of a cognitive bias is that we're entirely unaware of it. So all of these biases are occurring, and they're occurring outside of our consciousness. Now, give an example of a bias here. So this is this if we remember this problem here, the AB47 and the beer-Coke problem, this was done by a researcher called Peter Wasson. Okay? Now, he invented or developed a couple of other tests as well that profoundly influenced psychology. And probably one of his best-known tests here is, it's often called the Wasson 246 test. And basically, it goes as follows. You give 3 numbers. These 3 numbers conform to a simple rule. And you have to find out the rule. Okay, we'll only go part way through this. Okay, and the way you do that is you don't guess what the rule is. You give 3 numbers, and then the person that is telling you will either say conforms or does not conform. Okay, so there's the 3 numbers there, 2, 4, 6. They conform to some kind of rule. So What I need now is someone to call out 3 numbers. 369, okay? Conforms. 5, 10, 15. Conforms. 1, 3, 4. Conforms. Okay, we'll stop there. Yep. Right, now basically, we can see that with this, what we're probably doing is we're developing a hypothesis, an idea about what the rule is. And then we're developing a series of tests. So all of us testers should now be getting excited. Now, we know as testers that what we should do is we should be aiming to set tests that are intended to break this hypothesis. We all know that as testers, yeah? So what did the average population do when they actually create this here? What they do is they'll form a hypothesis, and then if you look at the series of tests that they create, that Watson in Watson's test there, the tests that they wrote, or the numbers that they called out there, they conformed to the hypothesis that they believed there, the rule. So they were trying to confirm the rule, or they were writing things that would confirm the rule, not break the rule. Now we know as testers, if you want to find out if something's true or not, that's not the way to do it. So as testers, and I did this in a workshop, how do you think we did? Did we do better than the average population? A little bit. Actually, no, they could have done a little bit better, actually. I couldn't detect it there, though. We did no better than the average population. Okay. Right, so this is confirmation bias, a manifestation of it, which is where we will search for, we will interpret, we will favour, and we will recall information that confirms our pre-existing hypothesis or beliefs or theories. Yep. Now, question is, are there any downsides to actually, if we go right back to the start there, and we had the AB47, and then we had that barroom problem, and we saw there that actually if we put the problem in terms of that bar there, how much easier it was to solve. Are there any downsides to using social reasoning or anthropocentric thinking? And if we think about it, what we really want to do is we want to solve problems like this because they're triggering our deontic reasoning. Okay, so if we've got a problem like this, we want to somehow map it to the problem at the top there. Okay, so we can trigger that other reasoning. And so if we do that, then we'll be able to identify that actually tests around there aren't important. Yeah. Now this is going to be great if we get our mapping correct. But if we get our mapping wrong, then likely we're going to probably exclude valid tests and maybe write a load of tests or ask the wrong questions there. So there are potentially some downsides to it. Okay, but there's probably more upsides than downsides. Now, in conclusion then, reasoning is really important for us as testers. We're using it all the time. Yep. Okay, and this reasoning, it has evolved, and it's evolved through natural selection, and you've seen those mechanisms there. Yep. Now, if we want to improve our reasoning, we're going to have to do the following. Okay, we're going to have to understand where our sources of reasoning are coming from, and I've sort of given some good indications and clues here. Yep. And so we've got to understand and learn the difference between this indicative and this deontic reasoning here. And so that means that if we want to use this deontic reasoning, we need to understand a whole lot more around social reasoning, this dominance theory, okay, theory of mind, okay, and error management theory, and perhaps one or two other theories that perhaps we uncover or we learn about from the social scientists there on that way, okay? And we need to understand them a whole lot deeper than I've been talking about in this 40 minutes here. There's something else we also need to do as well, which is, and it's not with us, it's with our bosses. We need to convince our bosses actually that they need to value reasoning more than that is happening at the moment, so that we can spend more time on it. Okay, so now what I've talked about here is just one aspect of reasoning, okay, which is basically talking about, and that's just one of the aspects, one of the things that we do, and it's just one of the problems that we have in software development. But if we look here, Okay, at this list of items that's coming up here, we have got lots and lots of problems in software development and software testing here. Projects overrunning. You know, I can't remember the last time I was in a project that did not overrun, either in budget or time or both. Overdue projects take excessive risks. Projects will drift and we don't notice. Every technical debt, all of these things that you see here have got three things in common. The first is that they're endemic. Every single organization experiences them. The second is that they're chronic. We experience them again and again and again. So whatever's causing them, we're not learning from it. The third thing that all of them have in common is that driving these problems, driving these issues here, are a set of our thought processes and human factors, either cognitive biases or the heuristics that we use in our decision making or in our cognition there. These problems have always existed in software development. They will always exist and they will continue to exist until we start addressing the drivers in there that we're not addressing at the moment, which is human processes. So, the question is, of course, can we do this? Yeah. And the answer there is, well, actually, other fields, other sectors are doing this. So, if you look at economics now, okay, there's two Nobel Prize winners up there. Okay, Richard Thaler, who wrote Nudge, and Daniel Kahneman, who wrote Thinking Fast and Slow. They won their Nobel Prizes essentially for bringing in behavioral science or psychology into economics and economic theory and solving problems that the economists for decades, possibly arguably for some of the problems for centuries, have been unable to solve using rational economic theory or theories that assume an ideal rational human. Okay? So it is entirely possible to do this. Okay. Now, I'll come to it now. Basically, this final section here is a call for action to everyone here. Okay, I am looking, and I've been looking for some time, to start building up a community. And it's a community of people that are interested and believe that the biggest problem that we face in software development is not technology itself, but it's actually thought processes and the human processes that that come in and interfere with things here. And not only people that believe that, but actually say, I'm interested in doing something about it. There. And so if you're interested, do contact me and do get in touch with me, and somehow we will get something together and get a movement together and start looking at this in the same way that it's happened in economics there. Okay, and I'm available, there's my email address. I'm available on LinkedIn, and please join me on either of those, or just simply write your name on a piece of paper if you are if you're a technophobe and you don't trust technology, and I don't blame you if you don't. Just write your name and an email address on a piece of paper and hand it to me at the end there. Okay, so I'd like to say, well, thank you very much for being a great audience. Do you have any questions?